General Dempsey, all of the military options which are beginning to be contemplated, humanitarian corridors, limited aerial strikes, safe havens, all would presume that we would have complete control of the airspace over Syria. And given what we know about their air defense systems, that would presume, I don't know what you can comment openly, that the first step in any type of military operation would be a campaign to suppress their air defense systems. Can you kind of give us some general notion about how long that would take and how challenging it would be?
Senator, as I mentioned, we've demonstrated the capability to penetrate air defense systems for a discrete purpose in a very limited amount of time, and that stays. We still have that capability. As I mentioned, to conduct an enduring or a sustained campaign, we would have to suppress the air defense. And in closed session, we do have an estimate based on gaming and modeling of how long it would take to do that, given the density and the sophistication of their air defense system. But it would be an extended period of time and a great number of aircraft.
And it would be by the nature of our capability presumptively led by the United States rather than our NATO allies because of our capabilities?
Almost unquestionably, we have the electronic warfare capabilities necessary to do that.
So from a perceptual view alone, the opening stages in any military operation would be an extended, almost exclusive air campaign by the United States against Syria, presumably supported politically by the Arab League, the NATO, the EU, and everyone else. But the kinetic part of the operation would be ours for several weeks before we actually started even going in and effectively protecting Syrians. Is that a fair judgment?
It is a fair judgment. We generally, not generally, we can only act with the authorized use of military force, either with the consent of a nation in our national self-defense or with an UNSCR. And so we would have to have some legal basis. It would be my military advice that whatever we did would be part of a coalition, both because we increase our capability and capacity, but also we've shown that produces an enduring outcome. And then we'd have to balance it against risk elsewhere in the region.
The other aspect is that in our testimony yesterday, General Mattis indicated that unlike Iraq, there were no natural safe haven areas, the mountains, and also, I think, unlike Iraq, there's no very well-organized forces that could provide even a limited self-defense. So, creating these safe havens is a geographic challenge, and there's also an institutional challenge. Who's going to physically defend them? And, we could have air power and try to interdict Syrian military convoys and, tank columns, but that wouldn't work 100%. So is that another challenge that you're considering?
Sure, it is a challenge. And again, in the context of this, as you note, the border with Iraq, the border with Jordan, the border with Israel, and the border with Turkey all have their own unique complexities. And so I think we'd have to get through that. But I want to be clear. We can do anything. The question is, so it's not about can we do it, it's should we do it, and what are the opportunity costs elsewhere, and what are the risks?
And in terms of the opportunity costs, there are costs in collateral civilian casualties to air operations. There are costs in terms of time a lot of time or sometimes to set up the operations. So the notion that we can sort of in a few hours or days quickly go in and establish superiority, stop the fighting is not accurate.
You obviously have a military background, sir.
I show up on time most times, if that's my meant.
Senator, if I could just point out, again, we can discuss this in closed session, but what we've talked about is that air defense system that is pretty sophisticated. But more importantly, a lot of it is located in populated areas. There would be some severe collateral damage in going after those areas.
Let me change the subject, Mr. Secretary, because we've talked on the military aspects, but there's a political aspect here. And I'm not at all an expert on Syria, but what struck me in some of my reading is that there is a small Alawite clan of Shia who dominate the government, but the other minority sectors, the Syrian Kurds, the Syrian Christians, also seem to see their future most closely allied with Assad and his group, and very influential, even though minority, is very influential. And there has yet to be, I think, the creation of a truly national and credible opposition to Assad. So it's awful difficult to build this or to get him off when there's nobody to take his place, and there's still strong support in areas, in communities that you wouldn't necessarily think would be supporting. Is that part of the analysis that you've looked at?
That's correct, and that's part of the problem. It is, having worked pretty closely on the Libyan situation, when there were some leaders that came to the front and were able to organize a council, and it had credibility with the opposition. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. There are some outside groups that are trying to organize, but there isn't the relationship with regards to what's happening in the country. And as a result, it's very difficult to have to be able to know who we deal with there in terms of an opposition.
I think the final point I'd make is that going back to military capacity in Libya, and again, this, I think the first point is we have to assume is Syria is not Libya, but there seem to be tribal paramilitary organizations. I don't know, I don't get the same impression that outside the military there's any type of or security forces, there's any kind of counterpoint, and that we would have to, unless there was a political solution to force Assad off, if he was going to be disposed, it would have to be organized. We'd have to organize a force, and that would take many, many months. Is that a?
Well, I mean, that's the current state of our thinking about how we might do this. And if you think about two recent experiences, Libya, we had tribal forces on the east and west collapsing on the center, essentially. Even in Afghanistan, we had the Northern Alliance collapsing on the center. There's no geographic density of opposition to collapse anywhere. They're all intermingled. And by the way, it's 70% Sunni and 30% Druze, Christians, Alawi Shia. And those three have been the Alawites have been in control and have essentially protected the others, and so there is that dynamic as well.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.